I was laughing at the, like, I walked up here and everyone did such a great job, like, calming down. Thank you for joining us, not only for this, but for the Pride event that'll come afterwards. But a particular thank you to all of you who came to have a bunch of numbers thrown at you for an hour before we make it up to you with drinks. My name is Shay Gardner. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at LGBT Tech. I use she, her pronouns. And this is the third year that LGBT Tech has let me run with this sort of monster of a national survey on LGBTQ plus adults and their digital usage and access and experiences. And this survey was born out of a recognition within LGBT Tech that we were spending a lot of time in our policy shop talking about the community and about their experiences. And while a lot of that was very qualitative sort of in nature, we also wanted to make sure that we were hearing directly from the community in that as well. And year over year, the survey has continued to get a little bit more specific and a lot of it better, I think, along the way. And this year's results are very interesting, and I'm just going to dive right in. I didn't have a proper spiel prepared. But I think it's the survey is available on our website, or excuse me, the full report is available on our website, and there's going to be a QR code at the end of the slides with that on there if you want to check it out in its entirety. I included sort of these pages to show you there is a lot of breakdown within that, a lot of demographic breakdown, a lot of specifics. That I'm just not going to get into today because I'm not trying to put any of you to sleep. But please feel free to either dive into the survey, to ask me questions at the end of this, to email me questions after this, anything about that. But it is probably no surprise that year after year something we found is how embedded the digital world is in every aspect of LGBTQ plus life, right? The digital world is not siloed from the physical world. It is not its own vacuum. Everything that is happening in the physical world is happening in the digital world as well, whether that be positive interactions like community building and resource sharing, or whether that be really sort of the worst parts of our real world experiences, from harassment to misinformation. So we're going to kind of, we're going to go over the sort of swath of that throughout this. If anyone is a methodology nerd, this is, we survey roughly 1,300 LGBTQ plus adults across the United States on their digital usage, access, and experiences. They are self-identified LGBTQ plus adults. And we oversample for transgender individuals. Something you will see throughout the survey is as reliant as the community overall is on digital spaces and experiences, that only doubles, triples for members of the transgender community. And something we like to be very cautious in explaining right off the bat is that because this is a web sample of a survey, or excuse me, a web panel of a survey, we are never trying to say that this survey is representative of experiences of LGBTQ plus adults who do not have any digital access. We see this as representative of those who are able to get online or get access and what happens from there. Oh. If anyone liked last year enough to come back for a second round, these are very similar categories. These are exactly the same categories as they were last year, and we're going to try to keep them the same moving forward. But we tried to kind of organize them in a bit of a story, right? Moving from digital access and device usage, nothing good that happens online can happen if you don't have the devices and the connectivity and the infrastructure to get there in the first place. Healthcare, education, and employment, we always pull that out into its own section because those are three parts of the LGBTQ plus experience that are consistently under attack in the real world, particularly right now, particularly for the trans members of our community. And so it is always important for us to figure out how members of the community are using digital access and spaces to overcome some of the disparities that they're facing in the real world. Social media platforms and online platforms, it was certainly my experience. I'm sure if anyone in the room is community, it may have been yours, where you first find people that are like you, that look like you, that feel like you, that think like you. So we dive into that and into the sort of identity formation and online expression that comes from it, as well as the other side of the dual-edged sword, right? Harassment, privacy, safety concerns, and safety steps community is taking. We're not trying to pretend this is like a perfectly pleasant experience anyone is having online. We know it's not. And finally, this is going to surprise absolutely nobody, but we do ask quite a bit this year on artificial intelligence. Those are some of my favorite numbers that we found in the survey. They are also some of the most interesting in terms of how the community perceives and uses artificial intelligence. So, all that said, I'm going to dive right in with digital access and device usage. Like I said, if you can't get online, you can't do anything else that comes with being online. What we do know is that digital access is very widespread in the community, with 96% of LGBTQ plus adults using the internet at least once a day. And that is one of the only numbers in the survey that was consistent across pretty much any demographic, any subgroup that we surveyed as well. Members of our community are highly connected because connectivity is necessary to the way that we live, that we learn, that we grow and connect. We do rely on a mix of devices to get online, and part of the reason we like calling this out is because of the work our programs team does. Our program does device and grant distribution to community centers and individuals across the United States, and part of that work is ensuring that members of the community have access to a range of devices, not just simply one. We know members of the community aren't using them all the same way. We want to make sure we're meeting people where they're at. We asked about connectivity, if anyone is curious how folks are connecting when they're at home. It's 87% of the community does have in a sort of an ISP service, a home broadband service. And of those, cable internet kind of continues to be the majority of the market, but fixed wireless is taking an increasing share year over year. That number is up, I believe, from 17% in 2024, now up to 25%. And we know that 11% of the community say they just do not use home internet at all. They are mobile only in the way they access the internet. Affordability remains one of the clearest barriers in all of our data in this sort of area about usage and access. We asked, these are experiences from the past 12 months. And in the past 12 months, roughly 10% of the community saying across the board that they had lost internet, downgraded a plan, hit a mobile cap, or not repaired a device out of fear due to cost. So for us, while we love seeing how connected the community is previously, this does reflect a meaningful level and layer of instability within a community that is extremely reliant on these devices. And these are numbers we're not thrilled to see, particularly how they increase for those with multiple marginalizations or for trans members of the community. Yeah. And we know that community infrastructure will fill the gap. If folks don't have access at home, we know they are going into public spaces to find it. And the first step there is members of the community have to feel like they have somewhere they can go, and then they have to feel like that is a trusted place to be and to be online. And we saw that when we asked about coffee shops and cafes, public libraries, LGBTQ plus community centers, and shelters and housing service providers. For the purposes of this conversation, we always like to focus in on kind of those LGBTQ plus community centers. With 46% of adults say they have used internet there, 26% with some frequency. So that's folks that say that they have used it either sometimes or often, as opposed to just have at some point. And as you can see on the slide, this ties in directly with the incredible work that our programs team does with these community centers. The numbers here, these are also increased. I believe it is 51% of trans adults that say they have ever used internet at a community center, and that number goes as high as 60% for Black LGBTQ plus adults as well. And it's, for time purposes, not going into too many of the details now, but a lot of those numbers from the previous slide, some of these, the shelters and housing service providers, those numbers went up substantially year over year. That's written in the report. It is probably no surprise to anyone trying to navigate this economy right now, but folks in our community are increasingly having to find creative ways to get connected. And concerns about cost reinforce this entire picture. With the majority of adults concerned about the cost of devices, the cost of internet, and the unexpected cost of broken devices, as well as nearly half concerned about the availability of service in their area. So this for us really speaks to, if anyone does work in the room, does work around the digital divide, right? When you see a number that says 96% of LGBTQ plus adults are online every day, you'd be like, well, there's no divide there. That is absolutely not the case. Members of our community are experiencing the divide in more nuanced ways, whether that is affordability strain, whether that is having to be mobile only because of cost reasons, whether that is having to rely on public access for internet. And everything else that will come in this survey about the importance of being online underscores why it is so critical that we try to be addressing that divide in the first place. Swinging right on through to healthcare, education, and employment. I mentioned we'd like to focus on these three because these are three areas where our community has suffered incredibly and continues to suffer disparate impacts in the real world. And education and employment are kind of especially always of personal interest to me because these are two spaces where I think historically members of the LGBTQ plus community have been expected to leave their identity at home. When it came to schools and particularly where it came to jobs. So we surveyed and asked whether members of the community were using the internet to assess specifically for LGBTQ plus friendly and safe spaces to be in these realms. As well as whether what these numbers speak to is not only whether they're using the internet to find these spaces, but the fact that they are specifically looking for them. Right? This is now becoming something that is important for members of the community to find in their jobs, in their employment spaces, and in their education is spaces where they can be safe, and they are using the internet to do that. 64% said that the internet was important for finding LGBTQ plus friendly healthcare providers. We dug a little bit deeper on that this year. We recognize healthcare, again, particularly for the trans members of the community, right now is very difficult to find in physical spaces. And we wanted to know what the impact of digital access was on seeking healthcare. And we asked about everything from online portals through sexual and reproductive healthcare to therapy, HIV prevention and treatment, to gender-affirming care online. And found some fairly high numbers, not even specifically within the community overall, but again, within some of those subgroups and those demographics. It's probably no surprise to see a number that says 45% of transgender adults have used the internet to find gender-affirming care. But seeing numbers that are so substantially higher within some of these multiple marginalizations versus the community overall is really interesting. And is I think something, this was our first time asking this set of questions. There's going to be more on this next year. I think we want to know more. Other things we all use the internet for, right? If it's not healthcare, if it's not education, if it's not employment, chances are it is probably either entertainment or community or socialization or resource seeking, I guess I should say. And that is all happening on online platforms and social media usage. And this is LGBT Tech works in every one of these sort of spaces that we're talking about today, whether it be health data, whether it be wireless, whether it be affordability access, whether it be social media platforms. But this is an area that is making a lot of headlines right now. And so this is certainly of interest of us, or for us to understand. So, as this sort of conversation around youth access on social media and what that access should look like is increasingly becoming more targeted around the idea that young people maybe should not be online or should not be on social media platforms, we are finding that 87% of adults that grew up with access to social media platforms, so that's anyone aged 40 or lower or younger, anyone who would have had access to social media platforms before the age of 18, joined them before the age of 18. That number again rises. It rises to 97% among respondents aged 18 to 24, so our sort of youngest demographic there as well. And normally, in moving through these sections, I always like to leave the concerns at the very end, but I did pull two of them forward here to speak to how keenly aware the community is of the potential loss of access to these spaces, either for themselves and not being able to provide verification, identity, age, or how concerned they are about loss for young people right now within the community who are looking to get online. So these numbers underscore why we fight so hard as an organization for access, relatively autonomous access, safer access, yes, but access, absolutely. And once we asked when they joined, we then asked why they joined. We wanted to know if the need to join I don't know what word I'm looking for. If the desire to join it was based in sort of finding community, and the answer overwhelmingly has been yes. It has been yes year over year. It continues to be yes year over year. Beyond simply being sort of early adopters of these different technologies and platforms, members of our community are. Oh, I apologize. That's not doing great. But the members of our community are having sort of their first informative experiences and encounters with other community members online, whether that be expressing themselves more openly, exploring and learning about identities, finding support, escaping the real world. These are things that young members of our community deserve to have access to. And these are things that keep them not only happy, but do keep them safe. That was why they joined. This is where they are now. So we do ask what platforms members of the community are on. And I'm not going to stay on this slide very long. I'm just going to draw attention to the square directly in the middle, which says that 42% of LGBTQ plus adults use AI services. That is one of the sharpest increases that we have continued to see year over year. That was 32% last year, I believe 26% the year before, so it continues to go up, up, up. And one of the most interesting places we're actually seeing that is adults 65 and older. Last year it was 12% said they had used AI services. This year it is 24. So still relatively low numbers, but that is one of the only places you'll see a like straight up doubling, kind of along the lines. We'll get into AI a little bit more in a bit. But again, we asked where you are now, and then we asked what you're doing on them. So our data does show how platforms continue to function as this source of reoccurring infrastructure for LGBTQ plus life. With the majority of the community using platforms to connect with friends, to connect with informational resources within the community, to find new friends that they can relate to in that capacity, to engage in activism and advocacy, and to seek mental health support. Along the way. It is probably unsurprising, again, that all of these numbers are much higher for trans adults. These are just the LGBTQ plus adult numbers. And these are the numbers of folks who say they do this on at least a monthly basis. Every single one of these is at least 10% daily that members of the community say they are using social media or online platforms to access these specific community functions. All of that dependence on the platforms makes instability in platform access more consequential, more harmful, more something we are doing our best to fight against. So in the past 12 months, nearly a quarter of LGBTQ plus adults say they've seen content about the community removed or taken down, with still numbers that are way too high for me to be comfortable saying they felt content was harder to find. Many saying they changed what they posted about themselves or their identity out of fear, and too many saying they saw their own content or their own accounts being inaccurately or inappropriately suspended, removed, taken down in the process. I don't like those top numbers. I really, really hate those bottom ones as well. It is no surprise to us that sort of in even the most well-meaning of content moderation, if it does not account for members of the community, it is going to have a very hard time parsing out what those sort of the identity and the expression of individuals looks like. We know the LGBTQ plus community, particularly trans people, particularly trans content, is the first to get swept up in that moderation. And I think you see that when looking at the numbers about how many trans folks are saying they've been kicked off these platforms undeservedly. And again, this is I think unsurprisingly, concern about platform gatekeeping online remains overwhelming. All of that reliance we were talking about, all of those incredibly positive community-seeking information gathering that can happen on these spaces, it comes with a side of this that everyone is keenly aware of, concerns about censorship, platform bans, removals, restrictions. Roughly 2/3 of the community being concerned across the board on those, and those numbers rising to roughly 9/10 of trans adults. We are a community that relies on these spaces. We are not a community that still feels as comfortable within them as we would hope or like. We ask a couple of questions. This is a very brief section, but I always like to call it out, specifically this number. This is one of my favorite statistics year over year, is 65% of LGBTQ plus adults, 82% of trans adults, saying online spaces had a direct impact on their discovering, learning about their identity. We know that we are a community that historically we have found ways to find ourselves and to find each other. We did it with zines, we did it with phone lines, we did it with coffee shops and bars. The internet is just our most accessible and our most recent tool. But it also does provide that sort of access to others in a way that we have not previously had such ease with. So this is always going to be a number I give its own slide. Something different we did do this year, though, is we did not just ask about online spaces generally. We also wanted to take a look at some of the intricacies within those online experiences, and to ask, okay, we know online spaces had an impact. How about some of the different mechanisms that are operating within those spaces? Did those have an impact on it? And I mean, again, the answer is yes. Whether it's user-generated content, whether it's influencers talking about LGBTQ plus issues, whether it is mainstream media and entertainment representation, whether it's platform-recommended content, which is algorithmically recommended content. The two here that I want to draw attention to right now, because they are very much related to what's happening in the public sphere and the legislative sphere. The first is that mainstream media or entertainment piece there. Right now the FCC, or recently the FCC issued a proposal to add a warning label to any public media or media for young people that had transgender identity, representation, or discussions about trans identity. They wanted to add a warning label, as well as to add stricter content ratings to any of that, which essentially would have made trans representation akin to violence or graphic sexual content. Obviously, atrocious. LGBT Tech has been very, very involved in the fight against that. But also, when you look at the impact that would have, the chilling effect and the impact that would have on representation in media, that is what makes numbers like that so impactful. The second one I want to point out is that platform recommended content. A lot of discussion right now about what aspects of social media need to be regulated, need to be prevented from being accessible to certain people. LGBT Tech advocates very strongly to make sure that the concept of algorithms and platform recommended content is not being swept up in its entirety into these conversations about addictive feeds, about, it is this sort of like dark matter feeds. It's because we do know that algorithms drive all of these platforms. And when we are seeing numbers that demonstrate how impactful surfacing content can be for the community, we want to protect that in this capacity. This for us speaks to the number of people who would go online, and if you have a feeling but you don't have the vocabulary to explain it, where do you find it? It's surfaced to you on your TikTok For You page, right? This section captures one of our report's most notable tensions across the board. How online spaces can and do feel more usable, more survivable, and necessary, or more usable and more survivable than some physical spaces, while at the same time having harassment and misinformation be incredibly pervasive across the board. So, we found that a quarter of LGBTQ plus adults and 93% of trans adults say that they have experienced anti-LGBTQ plus misinformation on digital or social platforms. I should have put it on the slide here, but the thing that interests me about this number is not actually the people that say they have experienced it, but the number of people who aren't in that, the number of people who say they have not. This being a matter where more than 20% of LGBTQ plus adults overall say they have not experienced misinformation, and you've got 7% of trans adults saying the same, tells me that there is still a lot of anti-LGBTQ plus misinformation, specifically anti-transgender misinformation, that is happening on these platforms, that is surfacing in a way that even members of the own community may not be recognizing. That is a slight assumption I'm making, but we are seeing this year over year. Is that great numbers, but it is almost every trans person we survey says that they've seen it, and that's just not the same for the community overall. We like to do a sort of one-to-one every year of asking anti-LGBTQ plus bullying and harassment, how often that is experienced by folks in the community, both offline and online. I said at the very beginning of the presentation that digital spaces are not a silo. It is not a vacuum. The things that are happening in them, the bad especially, are exactly the same sorts of things that are happening in the real world spaces as well. That harassment, that hate, that bullying, that bigotry, that homophobia, that transphobia. So what I will say is that all of these numbers went up year over year, and the numbers online went up especially high. pardon. I always make one mistake on the slides every single year and find it as I'm going through them. The ones on the right, this is for transgender adults. I always find exactly one mistake. But all that to say, these are incredibly high numbers across the board, but online spaces actually did get worse based on this metric. What is interesting, though, is what happens when we follow that up with questions about perceptions of safety. Because even though online spaces, we are being told that they are spaces where more harassment and more bullying is happening based on identity. But then when we ask about perceptions of safety, they are spaces where people still feel safer. Particularly transgender adults, 67% saying they feel safe in online spaces versus only 44% in offline spaces. High rates, this for us really does speak to how high rates of online harm do not make these spaces disposable. And if that is the only part of the conversation that people are willing to have, is that harassment and hate is happening online, so people shouldn't be online. If that's the entirety of the conversation, you are missing this whole second piece. Privacy concern in particular is intense. It has remained intense. It's gotten slightly more intense. But it is also increasingly identity linked in the way that members of the community are concerned about how their data is being accessed, who is accessing it. This is no surprise when we consider, particularly on the federal legislative level and across some of the states, how data, personal information and data about members of the community is either attempted to be collected, is just straight up being collected, as well as being sort of misused, breached, sold. We could have an entire other hour on sort of data privacy principles, and this is a huge part of what LGBT Tech does. But this is all of this speaks to, I fear I'm being a little repetitive here, right? But our community is not unaware of the harms that they might face online. They choose to be there anyway. This is still a space that they feel they need access to for community, for growth, for self. And there is sort of this overarching theme within the community that says sort of like we protect ourselves, we protect each other, and we do kind of see that year over year when we ask about steps that members of the community are taking, which are relatively high. I want all of these numbers to skyrocket by next year. I've told our programs team that. I was like, that's the goal, is to get every number on this board higher except for that one. That one should be single digits. It is telling to me that even in a community with such high privacy concerns, that 10% of the community is willing to say, like, I know, I don't take any steps to do anything about it. So we are working as an organization to navigate and improve that element of it. And I will actually, before I get to artificial intelligence, which, like I said, is objectively the most interesting of the numbers that we found this year and the story that they do tell, what I will say is that if you are particularly interested in data privacy, cybersecurity, and what that means not only for our community but for other marginalized communities, we are doing a panel event next on the 16th with a number of other civil society groups, specifically on that issue, on data privacy, cybersecurity, and the impact on marginalized or underserved communities. So let us know if you're interested about that. But this is the term of the year is artificial intelligence. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. No one can decide what it is. My current favorite definition of artificial intelligence is just artificial intelligence is the thing we haven't gotten used to yet, right? It's like, because a Roomba could be under definitions, but we don't really see it that way, right? So it is just the thing we've not gotten used to. So I know internally we're working on our own definitions, and I know we're not the only ones. But we did absolutely ask the community. I mentioned earlier on in sort of the general numbers around platform usage that 42% of the community is using AI, and how astronomically higher that is compared to previous years. We did ask this year as well, in the past 12 months, what have you used AI for? And this is where I said kind of AI, I found these numbers the most interesting, is because across everything else I've just shown, whether it be the positives of the community and the interactions you can have in digital spaces, or whether it be the negatives of everything you find when you're there, whether it be the concerns, the benefits, every number in the survey, almost every number, is higher for the trans respondents of the survey for trans members of our community than it is for the community overall. It is higher, 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 until we started asking about AI, and then those numbers fell off a cliff. It is not surprising to me, but I am now happy to have the data to tell the story, that the subgroup of our community that is already most impacted by digital harms is understandably the one that is most concerned and most hesitant about using them in the first place. So these are numbers generally across the board. What have you been using AI for? Jobs, questioning, mental health or emotional support, identity-related questions. We also asked, one of the options in sort of this question set here was, I do not use AI. I have not used, I do not use AI services. That was 30% of LGBTQ plus adults. That was 47%, I believe. 41. I'm gonna go 41 because that's less, and if I'm wrong, it's less embarrassing. But it was a significantly higher number for trans adults saying that they do not use and have not been using AI services in any capacity. And then what is really interesting, at the end of every one of these segments, I've always had kind of the concerns, and I tend to list those together. But when we asked about artificial intelligence, we queried members of the community both on their concerns, their perceived concerns, and whether they thought certain elements of AI, certain use cases could be beneficial, could allow for efficiency in certain areas that would benefit the community. So we asked about both, and while normally I present them separately, I am trying something a little different this year and actually putting them side by side, because I think it is very interesting to see the complexity in the way the community sees this tool, which is not as much of a blanket rejection as I think I would have expected. Particularly when you've got 3/4 of the community saying they are concerned about something like AI enabling harassment, and then turning around and more than 6/10 saying they believe AI could be effective in preventing harassment for the community. It is the harms and the concerns that our respondents were demonstrating when it came to AI for us really tracks with those, with the existing harms, with the existing harms that they are already experiencing in digital spaces, right? It is all of these concerns about harassment, concerns about privacy. Those are the same things that they are experiencing and concerned about in any digital space right now that is more accessible and widely used than AI services. But for it to come kind of with this side of, for lack of a better term, I mean optimism, right? The belief that there could be a good outcome, I think is very telling. Obviously, this comes with the absolute biggest asterisk of how are you training, how are you deploying, what are you doing with it in order to make that possible. But we like that we are seeing some possibility. We see the same thing here with misinformation. So many concerned about AI spreading misinformation, but so many also saying that they believe AI could be beneficial in actually identifying misinformation and making, or excuse me, in offering more accurate and inclusive information. That's all going to come down to data training, right? Similar with AI and privacy. This is a very concerned about the aspect of the impact AI can have on an individual's personal information and privacy. Believes it could be effective in enhancing digital privacy. Putting these numbers side by side is so interesting in seeing this, and this is why we as an organization are having so many conversations about the nuances, the details, about how you get this right, because we're seeing kind of responses like this. And one last one in this, and I believe there are 6 in total in the report, but I'm only throwing 4 up on the slides here, are just AI bias and algorithms, but also believing that, again, AI could be used to make smarter recommendations, which would be algorithms as well. So sort of recognizing, here, I'm actually gonna do this. This is a very interesting landscape we've left ourselves with in AI, where there is both optimism and concern, and one is slightly more than the other, but there is not at all this chasm here that I think I would have expected to see, particularly based on those numbers that you're seeing in the gray. And I do want to end, I'm coming to a close here. I promise you're almost done hearing from me. But I do want to end on one slightly positive note, which is actually the highest metric we saw on AI across the entire survey. This was the highest for all adults, for trans adults, for any demographic. This is the thing they were most enthusiastic about the potential of AI doing, which was AI being effective in improving accessibility for users with disabilities, or for LGBTQ plus individuals with disabilities. There is a sort of sentiment that we are experiencing when we talk to members of the community that AI being used as a tool to improve their lives is a good thing. AI being used as a supplement or a replacement for them, or for the work they do, or for their creativity, is absolutely not. And this being a high number, and being really the only high number when it came to AI positivity for trans adults, I think really underscores that. So with that, I think in the same way I did not really prepare an intro spiel, I did not prepare an outro either. But what I will say is I will open the floor to some questions if anybody has it. And if I don't have the answers for you, they may be in the report. And if they're not in the report, I will find them and then send them to you. But again, thank you so much for taking the time. We are releasing this cybersecurity guidebook on navigating cybersecurity for LGBTQ plus organizations. So this is and much of the information in here as well is meant to be able to be implemented on an individual level as well. So that's part of the way when I joked about making programs, make that 10% single digits. I think hope this will actually have an impact on that. In the same vein, a lot of the work we're doing is we recently released on the policy side, we recently released a roadmap for data privacy principles for federal and state legislators, where we outlined 7 principles that we think should be considered in a way that would create a better data privacy environment for members of the community. I think it's kind of in your question about what other steps here are actionable, transparently as a think tank, a lot of these we ask the questions that are related to the work we're doing, right? Any of those, but what I will say is the 2 that stand out to me, the first is the affordability piece, which is why, we as an organization are always fighting and looking for ways to fight to improve access to more affordable service and more widespread service to unserved or underserved areas around the country. That affordability piece sticks out to me for next steps. The other part is access to social media platforms and what happens when individuals are on them. A, preserving the access to it for young people and for adults alike, and B, improving the experience they are having once that access is being protected in the first place.
Can I get a round of applause for Shay? I'd also like to thank my team. They've put in an incredible amount of work as we go into, as I say, Professional Queer Month. And I think 10 events over the next 2 weeks. So a huge thank you to the team. I don't think I've introduced him, but the co-founder of LGBT Tech is here, Joe Kapp here in the back. Although he's not involved as much anymore, he's still president of the board and still consistently engaged. I also want to thank our board member, Charles Keller, in the back, and WBK for hosting us. We go through this process and we've continued to refine it. We are counting the community so that we can represent them, and we are. Shay was just in California providing testimony to the state legislature with Trevor Project, and using these numbers on a day in and day out basis. We are using these numbers every single day, and they're helping companies, they're helping legislators better understand the use of our community and how they're using these technologies and accessing them, why it's different, why it's important. So I'm really proud of the fact that it's come to this point. We now have year-over-year data that we can start comparing, and we're not done. We are taking this internationally. We are moving to the EU. So if there's anybody in the room that wants to help fund that, I will absolutely talk to you, because the EU is really expensive to do research in. But we're really excited to do that because we think it's important. We recognize technology does not know borders, and the issues may be different, but they also may be the same, and we need to understand that to best represent our community. You already mentioned the data privacy roadmap. Keep an eye out in July. We actually are releasing an AI civil rights roadmap with our friends at Cornell University. Also, we're diving further into AI in general. We had already launched something back in 2024, and then the administration threw us for a loop around AI, as I'm sure many of you. So we kind of retooled it, and we brought on some amazing people, and we're now moving further into that. Actually, we get over 250 hits a day on our website for around AI. Also, we have our Paths Forward Summit next week. It's a virtual summit bringing together those in STEAM or STEM, and then also around our digital navigator. That's on our website. We are launching a digital hub in correlation to that for individuals, so more like bite-sized content for LGBTQ individuals to protect themselves and increase their cyber safety. And we were talking about hotspots or getting online, and although I don't think you really know this, but we are going to be launching a reduced cost hotspot program in a couple months. And so that'll be going live under our Power On program. Also, next year is our 15th year anniversary. We've been around for 15 years. For those of you that have been around us for some of our big events around IAPP here in DC, we've typically had about 900, between 700 and 900 people. We are looking to do something even bigger next year for our 15th year anniversary. So if you want to be involved, you want to support, please stay tuned, reach out to me. But it will be here in DC. And so we'll start probably actually at CES is where we'll kick things off. And then around October next year, we'll have a huge event here. So we'll keep you up to date. And thank you all so much for being here. And yeah, let's enjoy Pride.